Hello and welcome to a new episode of I Dream of Wise. Today I'm going to talk about an alternative to random containers, and this alternative uses the seek action in events and volume envelopes. I used this solution in a project I worked on a few months ago, and I thought it was pretty interesting, so I'm here to talk about it. So in this game I was working on, there is a turntable, and you can hit the turntable. There were a lot of things going on, like there was music playing from the turntable, so the moment you hit it, the music pitches down and then up again on another track in a random point in time of the other track. It was a pretty complicated event, but the thing I will focus on today is the scratching sound. So at first, when I had to cut and to put the sound of the scratch in Wise, I was searching in my library for a scratching sound. So what I wanted to find was like I don't know, some very short scratching sounds, like less than 1 second with a transient, and I wanted to find like maybe 3 or 4 to put in a random container, right? But then I found this sound. So this is a sound. It's like 12 seconds of turntable scratch. Okay. So I thought, well, my first idea was to chop this sound, this file into like 4 or 5 different assets, and to apply an envelope that resembles the hit of a turntable. But then I thought, well, maybe let's be fancier. Let's try something new. So this is what I ended up doing. I imported the file first of all as it is, so like the 12 seconds of scratching into Wise. So here it is. And the first thing I did was applying an ADSR to it. And because, yeah, right now, of course, if we play, it's continuous. So Wise has this super cool thing that's the ADSRs. So we can apply envelopes to more or less everything. So let's apply it to the most basic thing, which is the voice volume. So we will apply a default custom ADSR. And as an attack, I want it to be pretty fast. So I will set it to 0.1 second and a release of 0.2 second. Attack curve is fine. Decay time doesn't really matter, and sustain level as well, because we're going to use auto release. So it's not waiting for a release to happen. It's just triggering the release as soon as the attack is done. The scope is that node event is fine. I think it's fine. Not sure. Anyway, it triggers on play. Sustain time doesn't matter. I mean, it matters, but it has to be 0. And stop playback after release. Absolutely, yeah. So this is good. Now, the thing is, we're doing this to be fancier compared to a random container. We want to have more variation. So let's randomize the parameters in the envelope. The envelopes in Wise allow you to randomize their parameters, which is like amazing. So let's insert some values for the attack and for the release. I don't know. 0.2. Okay. Okay. Now let's try and play the asset. Okay, so it's starting to take form. So we can clearly hear that the envelope is different every time, especially the length, the overall length of the envelope. Sometimes we hear a bit more of the asset. But the thing is that right now we're only hearing the very start of the file every time. So how do we fix that? We can't do anything from the sound property editor, but we can do something in the event. So let's first create an event that plays this file, and it will be the event triggered by the game. So let's call it turntable hit, sure. And after the play event, we will use this, which is SiC, the SiC action. And we will use SiC on this object, scope is game object, of course. And we will scope using the percentage parameter. And what I usually do is like set the percentage to 50%, and then use the randomizer and set it to -50 and 45. Why did I do this? SiC changes the playback position of the associated Wwise object. And the SiC percentage parameter, it refers to the position expressed as a percentage of the sound's total duration. So the moment we set it to 50% and then we randomize it from -50 to 45%, we are actually randomizing it from 0 to 95%. And the reason why I go up to 95 and not to a full 100% is because I don't want the sound to be cut at the end. If, for example, 99% was selected by the randomizer. So every time we trigger this event, it plays and it seeks. So it goes to a random point in the file. So it's very important that we put the SiC after the play and not before, because simply otherwise it doesn't work and it plays always from the start. So a file has to be playing for SiC to work. And it's not important that we set a delay here. The delay can be 0, like the one on the play action, but it has to be below the play action in the event. So now if we play the asset itself, it will be exactly as it was before. It always plays from the start. But if we play the event, we can hear a ton of variations. And yeah, it's basically infinite variations, because the envelope will always be different, and the SiC will always go to a different point in the 12 seconds file. So this is pretty cool, I think. Another thing, a pretty fancy thing they introduced a couple of versions of Wwise ago, is this. So if we now play the turntable, the asset itself here, it always plays it with the ADSR. So we only hear the first half a second or so. And if we wanted to listen to the whole file, I don't know, we would probably have to locate it in the folder that contains it. I don't know, it would be kind of hard. But a few versions of Wwise ago, they introduced this thing, which is shift spacebar. So if we now click, we can listen to the whole file without any additional changes. Like if for example, if we set the pitch to -1200, this is the regular spacebar, and this was shift spacebar. So this is a very, very handy feature. One last thing, it's very important to take into consideration the conversion settings when we use SiC, because if we use Vorbis and we don't enable the SiC tables, it simply won't play when we try and use SiC. So what is a SiC table? I'm not an audio compression expert, like at all, but from my understanding, when we use Vorbis encoding format to compress a file, and we ask that file to play from a specific point in time, in the middle of it, Vorbis just can't do it. But to solve this problem, we can enable SiC tables. SiC tables are a way to put some, let's say, markers all throughout the file at a specified distance among them, which is constant. And the distance is expressed by this granularity value. So then when we ask a file to play from a specific point in time, it just snaps to the closest marker or keyframe or whatever and plays from there. So of course, the smaller the granularity value, the more accurate and precise the snapping will be. In this case, we don't really need a very accurate SiC table, but maybe for stuff like interactive music, we might need an accurate SiC table. So let's, for example, convert this file and try and play the event. So we use Shift-C to convert. It's now converting to Vorbis without a SiC table. So let's play the event and see what happens. Oh, of course it plays now, but that's because the original button is selected, so it's actually not referencing the converted files, but the original wave files. So let's unselect original and see what happens. As you see, it's not playing. So let's edit the conversion settings and introduce a SiC table. We can select whatever of these parameters. The lower the number, the more dense the SiC table will be. We don't really need something super dense, so let's select like an average number, like 8,000, and reconvert the file. Okay, and let's play the event. It's not working. So yeah, that's very important to consider. It's very important, especially because if you're using a version of Wwise that's prior to the 2016.2.2, which I'm now using right now, by default, the SiC table is disabled. A lot of people have trouble with that and don't understand what is going on, because by default, the original button is enabled, so you don't really notice any problem while you're authoring in Wwise. But in the game, it suddenly doesn't work, and you're there freaking out and thinking that maybe it's something in the code, or I don't know. So it's always a good thing to maybe audition your stuff, your Wwise stuff, with the original button unselected. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and see you next time.